Canada. Before Mark started his activism, books and magazines about marijuana were illegal. Information was illegal. Hemp was illegal. Medical marijuana was illegal. And Mark sold marijuana seeds for over a decade so you could plant the seeds of freedom and overgrow the government. He did this in Canada for 10 years. And the United States and their drug war came into Canada in 2005 and arrested Mark Emery here on Canadian soil, and he was facing 30 years to life in prison for his activism, for overgrowing the government, for telling them that you don't belong in prison. And for 5 years in a row, Mark and I have led the Global Marijuana March here, 20,000 people strong, marching through the streets of Toronto, saying we are peaceful, we are not hurting anyone, and the government wants to hurt us. Stephen Harper just won a majority government. In the next 100 days, he is going to introduce laws that will see many of you put in prison. How many of you smoke pot? How many of you grow pot? How many of you share pot or sell pot? But we've got a war ahead, people. This government is going to come after us and try and destroy this culture. And even this very event was almost stopped by the government here. But the wonderful organizers made it happen, and the people here, 40,000, made it happen. So we will march through the streets. We will tell the government we are not hurting anybody. Don't hurt us. And it's the first year without our Prince of Pot as he sits in a U.S. prison cell in Mississippi. And he is not here because of our government, because of the U.S. government. And we must march and be heard. So go to the north end of the park. Join us with your flags, with your signs, with your bongs, with everything you've got. And let's march through the streets of Toronto, overthrow the government, legalize it, and free Mark Emery!
Free Mark Emery! Free Mark Emery! Free Mark
How's Mark these days?
Well, Mark's doing all right. He's been moved to a medium security prison in Mississippi. He was before held in a minimum in Georgia. But he's trying to keep his spirits up. He's writing a lot. He's reading a lot. He's decided to start learning Spanish and how to play guitar. And he's going to hopefully teach some small business classes. So he's staying productive and trying to keep positive. It's definitely hard a lot of the time. But, he's happy knowing that I'm still out here working hard for him, and he's got a lot of people who support him and love him, and they're writing letters to him, so that helps get him through it all.
What's it like to see support in these numbers?
Well, it's fantastic. I mean, this is the 6th year that I've attended. Mark would have been here with me for the 6th year, but the last 5 he was here speaking and leading the parade. So this year I led the parade in his place with the sign and the flag, and just reminding him that we do all care. And there's a lot of people with Free Mark shirts and Free Mark signs because they have met Mark every year here. They're used to seeing him, and for them to realize that he's in a prison cell in the United States, a country he never went to before, is incredibly unjust and sad. So hopefully we can motivate those people to turn their support into action as well.
Do you feel like the result of the latest election is going to be a factor in pro-marijuana legislation in Canada?
Well, we're certainly in for dark days ahead, and that's very worrisome. There's no other way to put it. We're going to have very tough 4 years ahead. Stephen Harper has promised mandatory minimum drug laws. We're building prisons that are going to house mostly marijuana offenders, and he's declared a culture war on cannabis. He said it himself. So we're in for something similar to the George Bush years in the United United States. So there's a lot to be concerned about, but that just means we need to work harder than ever before to try and prevent it from getting really bad really fast.
What about some of the new young MPs on the NDP opposition? Is that a ray of hope?
I think it is a ray of hope that we have all these young people with the NDP getting elected and sitting in Parliament in a position of opposition where they're somewhat powerless. With the majority government, Harper can do whatever he wants. So the opposition NDP will just be able to criticize it, but they won't be able to stop anything from happening. But thankfully, with 4 years ahead of the MPs being young and idealistic, perhaps they can push for change, and we'll hopefully have allies in Parliament. But it's hard to say what Harper's going to do. He just ignores anyone he doesn't agree with. So he just likes to squash the opposition, and I'm concerned about our days ahead, but I'm also hopeful that as we see more and more victims of the drug war, we'll see more and more people working to end the drug war.